Hey there, welcome back to these conversations with no one, where I try to share my experience of living in a somewhat non-dual state of existence, or maybe more accurately, a state where I am less attached and identify less with my duality. Words will always be inadequate to try to explain this sort of thing, so I do the best I can. But I'm not here to discuss non-duality as a philosophy or a belief system or intellectual pursuit, but to give an idea of what it might be like to reach a state where you're no longer attached to the stories that we all live. One of the most pervasive changes in my perspective that happened after my ego destruction was my awareness of just how trapped we all are by these characters we play in our dual world. Once you really step outside of that character, it's actually mind-blowing just how scripted our lives really are. Non-duality discusses the idea of free will a lot, whether we have free will at all. And I feel the answer is both yes and no. I feel that we are free to choose, though sometimes we limit those choices based on our beliefs and our opinions and other factors. But we can never really be free from the fact that there's a finite number of storylines and experiences. There's a finite number of things in the world. We have a finite range of emotions, a finite range of sight, a finite range of hearing, and all these things can only combine in so many different patterns before things start to repeat themselves. Much like atoms combining to create physical reality, there's only a finite number of combinations these atoms can create. And so even though the universe might be infinite, if you travel far enough, you will eventually find everything repeating itself. Of course, you can never really go off script unless you think of things like severe, what we would define as severe mental illness. But that's really just itself the number of storylines we get to choose from. It seems to me that people who are drawn to non-duality or similar teachings are yearning to wake up from acting out all these storylines according to their pre-written scripts. They're people who want enough understanding to make their choices consciously. They want to make choices with integrity that align with the character they want to be, instead of simply being a collection of random traits that come from our conditioning environment. And I understand this desire to want to have the choice to act instead of always react, because I feel that's what brought me to where I'm at now. Throughout my whole life, I yearned to evolve past reactions I had no control over. I hated the feeling of being trapped inside intense emotional roller coasters I couldn't stop, even when I was aware of them and desperately wanted to. Of course, most of my life I failed miserably to evolve past this point, going through all the early stages of this struggle, like denial, suppression, suppressing my emotions, spiritual bypassing, that's always a big one, until a finally had that big meltdown that crushed my ego and broke my character completely. But now it's hard not to see all the people around me playing out these scripts over and over, playing out their characters and the dynamics those characters embody, much like people do when playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. They've chosen to be a fighter, and so they've worked on their strength because they've decided they're a fighter. They've decided to be a healer, so they work on their wisdom to the exclusion of everything else. And so I watch everyone I care about struggle with their scripts and agonize over their roles that they've chosen to play, with little or no awareness of the fact that they're playing out the same worn-out tropes over and over again, with little to no interest in escaping these patterns. The people I'm the closest to are those that are aware enough that they're working to free themselves from this hamster wheel of experience, those who want the freedom to make real choices. And I have all the time in the world for people at this stage in their lives, because our conversations and connections are always deeper than just a superficial list of stuff that's happening to us. I mean, it's still very difficult at times when my non-dual perspective isn't helpful to their dual experience. I feel so far removed from the idea of judging things good or bad that sometimes make observations that others take personally. Observations of things that I'm subjected to as well. These human traits and patterns are for me just a fact about the way the human experience is. It's not personal, but to others it can sometimes feel like an attack or judgment about them specifically. To be honest, I think humans are pretty ridiculous, myself included. And that's okay. What's wrong with being ridiculous? It's a beautiful part of this experience. In fact, taking ourselves too seriously is probably more of a problem. So when I use the word ridiculous, I feel no shame over it. And it's hard to remember that other people still connect a negative connotation to things like that. And even if they do accept that we're all ridiculous, no one likes the idea that they themselves might be acting ridiculously in a moment, especially when that observation comes from someone else, no matter how lovingly it's communicated. The simple fact that I don't believe in the seriousness of any of these storylines creates a separation from the reality of others, and sometimes it's hard to identify with how real it all is for them. I clearly remember how hard it was when I was in it, but in a similar way to how you remember an intense movie you just finished watching. Like once you step out of the movie theater, the impact of those experiences is now put into a larger context of life. And those experiences no longer have the same grip on you that they used to. You can joke about the scariest part and make light of the sacrifice characters made along the way, reflect on which characters made good or bad choices. But none of that's appropriate to discuss with someone who's still in the theater watching it all play out. And I really like this analogy, so let's take it a little further. So when I find myself sitting next to someone in the theater who hasn't seen this movie yet, well, there's no reason for me to say anything. They're enjoying the film, and they don't need my input. But sometimes I sit next to someone who's really anxious, so anxious at certain parts of the movie that they're having a hard time sitting through it. And those cases, I'll try to comfort them enough, hoping to help them relax so they can enjoy the rest of the show. But mostly, I'd prefer to sit in the back of the theater with someone who loves talking through the whole movie, enjoying it on a different level where every part of the production is appreciated. The actors and the acting, the script, the sets and costumes, the lighting, special effects, all the small miracles that had to happen to make this possible. So when I find the rare person who's discussing these things, I can sometimes get a bit too eager and talk too much. Especially talk more than is necessary. I can get so wrapped up in all of the things these characters could be doing that I forget to enjoy the art of what they actually are. Finding that balance of attachment and non-attachment is tricky, and I suspect I'll most likely be working on that for a long time to come. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for listening and joining me here in this beautiful spot. I appreciate this time, and I look forward to talking again. Take care.